p.m. in Hanoi, the host city of the second North Korea-U.S. summit that begins in the coming hours. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. The stage is set for the most high-stakes talks to date. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump are in Hanoi ahead of their second summit. We have a comprehensive rundown on what to expect. President Trump will meet with Kim for the first time in Hanoi this evening for a brief one-on-one chat and then proceed to a social dinner. At dinner, Trump will be joined by his top diplomat and his White House chief of staff. Plus, South Korea's main opposition, Liberty Korea Party, is set to hold its national convention to pick its new leader and members of its Supreme Council. The goal, to sweep to victory in next year's general elections. So in terms of diplomacy, it doesn't get much bigger than this. The leaders of North Korea and the United States will be having their first face-to-face of this summit in Hanoi later today. But before that, we hear the leaders have separate schedules before they get together. For more on this, let's connect to our Ji-won, who is in Hanoi for us to bring us the latest. Ji-won, just walk us through what we're expecting throughout the day.
Mark, it's still early in the morning here, but I can already feel the anticipation amongst the people for the big day ahead. Now, like you said, the White House announced that President Donald Trump will be having a one-on-one sit-down with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in the evening, followed by a social dinner, a first which will include two officials from each side. Now, joining that dinner will be Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Mick Mulvaney, acting White House Chief of Staff. Now, all this will take place at the Sofitel Legend Metropole, which will also be the official summit venue for tomorrow. But before all these, President Trump will start his day by meeting with Vietnam's President Nguyen Phu Trong at the Presidential Palace at 11 a.m. local time, and then Prime Minister Win Seon-phuc at noon. Now, as for the North Korean leader, we don't know much of his schedule, and there were many places we had expected he would go. But it looks like he wants to focus on his upcoming summit with President Donald Trump before anything else. It's reported that he won't be leaving Hanoi today, but that delegates related to economic issues could visit the industrial parks in the coastal city of Haiphong.
Okay, so President Trump's first schedule of the day is at 11 a.m. local time. That's 1 p.m. here in Korea. We'll keep everyone updated on that, of course. But Ji-won, we hear that North Korea's state-run news agency has reported the details of the entirety of Kim Jong-un's visit there.
Yes, Mark, we were able to have a closer look at what North Korean leader Kim Jong-un did yesterday, as the Korea Central News Agency reported on that earlier this morning. Now, it uploaded a picture of Kim Jong-un sat down at a table with Lee Yong-ho, the regime's foreign minister, Choi Sun-hee, Vice Foreign Minister Kim Sung-hae, who has the United Front Department Strategy Office, and finally Kim Hyuk-chol, who's been at the working-level talks with Stephen Biegun for several days in Hanoi. The report said upon his arrival in Hanoi, Kim received a report in his Melia Hotel on the activities of the working delegation for a successful second summit with the U.S. Now, KCNA also reported on Kim Jong-un's visit to the North Korean embassy in Hanoi yesterday. It said Kim learned about how the embassy operates and advised that they should further consolidate the deep-rooted friendly and cooperative relations with Vietnam. This is seen as an effort to emphasize Kim Jong-un's image as a leader of a normal state. That's all from me for now, Mark.
Okay, thank you very much to our Ji-won for that report from Hanoi. So as we've been hearing, the main cast of the second summit between Pyongyang and Washington are now both in the Vietnamese capital. Both North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump arrived in Hanoi on Tuesday. Kim Jong-un several hours earlier than President Trump. Kang Hyung-woo files this report also from Hanoi.
The faces of the second North Korea-U.S. summit, Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, are at Hanoi, setting the stage to take negotiations to the next level to achieve Pyongyang's denuclearization and forge lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. President Trump arrived in Hanoi late Tuesday at Noi Bai International Airport. After he was greeted by Vietnamese government officials on the red carpet, the U.S. leader got into his presidential limousine and headed for the JW Marriott Hotel in the western part of Hanoi. Earlier in the day, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un arrived at Vietnam's Dong Dang railway station after a grueling 60-hour train ride across China. After Kim shook hands with a number of Vietnamese officials, he left by limousine for the Melia Hotel in the city. The North Korean leader chose the regime's embassy as the first and last outing on the first day of his Hanoi trip. Hundreds of soldiers blocked the roads as Kim visited the embassy for less than an hour in the afternoon. Meanwhile, Pompeo met on Tuesday with Vietnamese Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Pham Binh Minh. According to the State Department, the top American diplomat thanked Minister Pham for Vietnam's partnership in hosting the summit. Kanyong-woo, Arirang News, Hanoi.
South Korea's top office says it's reviewing the possibility of President Moon Jae-in traveling to the United States soon after the Vietnam summit. During a phone conversation between Presidents Moon and Trump last week, President Trump said he hoped to hold face-to-face talks with the South Korean leader. Following those remarks, the Blue House says it's working on arranging a date and location for the proposed summit. The top office added Presidents Moon and Trump will speak over the phone late Thursday as the U.S. leader promised to update President Moon on the outcome of his summit with Kim Jong-un. With Kim Jong-un being sighted taking a smoke break at a Chinese station prior to his arrival in Vietnam, his sister, Kim Yo-jong, was seen holding a crystal ashtray for the regime's leader, but that's just a very small part of what she's tasked to do. Watchers say that during the summit thus far, her actions show she has taken a much larger role as an aide to her powerful brother. Park Se-young with more.
The one-minute video broadcast by Japan's TBS shows North Korean leader Kim Jong-un lighting a cigarette with a match and taking a drag at China's Nanning station in the pre-dawn darkness on Tuesday. His sister Kim Yo-jong is seen carrying a crystal ashtray for the North Korean leader. But the footage shows much more than the leader's sister holding his ashtray. Kim Yo-jong, who's the deputy director of the regime's propaganda and agitation department, has been making sure everything is running like clockwork, from the leader's arrival in Vietnam to his arrival at the Melia Hotel. Even during the first summit in Singapore, Kim Yo-jong was seen pulling out the seat for Chairman Kim, handing him his pen, and making sure everything was prepared for Chairman Kim's needs. Her ability to get things done quickly was even seen during last year's inter-Korean summits, with some even calling her a scene stealer, with her attentiveness and poise launching her into the spotlight. With the historic summit kicking off late Wednesday, watchers will continue to keep a close eye on the role Kim Yo-jong plays going forward. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's major political parties have adopted a joint statement showing their support for the second summit between North Korea and the United States, signed by the 5 biggest political parties. The statement reads that the parties welcome the smooth preparations for the Hanoi summit and hopes for its success along with the international community. The parties also said that the summit must take place based on the strong Seoul-Washington alliance, and relevant countries should step up their coordination in the future. They hope the meeting will become a milestone for North Korea's complete denuclearization and permanent peace on the Korean peninsula. They said they will keep close tabs on the outcome and take non-partisan measures if needed. It goes without saying that international news outlets are taking a big interest in the second Kim-Trump summit. Our Noah Ram takes a look at how some of them are assessing what will be a historic meeting.
US-based media outlet Vox weighed in on what it thought a possible deal between Kim and Trump may look like. Citing sources familiar with the negotiations, Vox reported that a tentative deal could involve the US agreeing to lift some sanctions on North Korea and improve ties in exchange for a commitment from Kim to close down a key nuclear facility. Other predictions include Pyongyang agreeing to return more remains of US troops who were killed during the Korean War. Vox even suggested a signing of a peace declaration to end the Korean War may come out, though many experts believe that may be a bit of a stretch. The website did note it's entirely possible this tentative deal will change. It also said President Trump would be the one making the most concessions, as sanctions relief would be more quantifiable than a mere commitment of denuclearization. Citing experts, the UK's Independent reported that Pyongyang may need to provide specific time-bound commitments of denuclearization and be willing to allow inspections of its Yongbyon facilities. Analysts also warned not to expect too much in terms of results from the Hanoi talks, adding that reshaping the relationship will take decades. Fox News suggested Kim should be the one to do more work if any meaningful progress was to be made, namely dismantling his regime's nuclear weapons program. Another US outlet, The Hill, wrote an op-ed suggesting that if denuclearization talks break down, then the fault rests entirely with Kim, as the Trump administration has put in more effort to reach a deal. The paper added that Kim should make the right strategic choice for the North Korean people and for his country to break out from its international isolation. However, The Hill said Kim is likely to reject such a deal, as his regime is hardwired to reject American overtures. It even suggested the leader is executing a subversion campaign against South Korea to create the conditions for unification under Northern domination. Despite certain doubts about the outcome of the Hanoi talks, many are optimistic of some progress being made. It just boils down to which side is willing to give in first. Noaram, Arirang News.
So the stage is set. The principal players are now firmly in place. Within the next several hours, we are going to witness history again, a second handshake between the leaders of North Korea and the United States, this time in Hanoi. If we cast our minds back a couple of years, no one would have ever thought such a thing would be possible. Let's get some expert analysis on the summit from Min Jong-hoon, who's professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Thank you for joining us again this morning, Professor.
Thank you.
So Washington's chief nuclear negotiator, Stephen Biegun, who's been intimately involved in laying the groundwork for this summit in Hanoi, has said that the Trump administration's goals in Vietnam, they're rather ambitious. They are threefold, namely agreeing to a shared understanding of what constitutes denuclearization, which is a big bone of contention between the two sides. Also a clear and concise roadmap towards peace and denuclearization, and a freeze on all of the regime's WMD programs. How realistic do you think those goals are to being achieved in Vietnam?
Well, I think that Stephen Biegun mentioned the three things just for what U.S. ultimately wants from North Korea. I think that what the U.S. wants from North Korea in these the negotiations is to achieve the complete denuclearization of North Korea. And to achieve the goal, the North Korea and the U.S. needed to have agreement about what constitutes the complete denuclearization, and to achieve the complete denuclearization, they need to have a roadmap to go there. Mm-hmm. And I think that the freeze on the WMD programs and the delivery means it's just initial the measures to go there. It's kind of the starting point to implement the complete denuclearization. So the Biegun mentioned the complete approach, the goal, eventual goal, and to get there, he also mentioned the process or the corresponding measures, and North Korea's the denuclearization measures. So the all comes just in the three things. But I think that again, that comment clearly shows what really the U.S. wants from North Korea.
Okay, so that's the end goal, but perhaps this week in Vietnam, if they can go some way towards achieving parts of those goals, then it might be deemed a success. Now, early expectations, it's fair to say, have faded somewhat since Singapore, but most people are expecting some kind of move in the right direction. They are expecting it to be a more meaningful outcome in Hanoi than what happened in Singapore. What do you think both sides will agree to, even if they are small steps?
Well, small steps, but just remind of what we got from the previous summit last year. We got the 4 agreements between the two countries. First one is the building of new relations between the two countries. Second one is to establish a lasting and solid peace on the Korean Peninsula. The third one is the complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. And the last one is the returning the remains of the American soldiers killed in the Korean War. So in the second summit this time, they need to show some progress in each agreement. So I think that for the first and second agreements, like the building relations and the establishing the peace regime, I believe that the two countries got some the good agreement about what the U.S. provides to North Korea for those things, like for the building of new relations. The U.S. I think is ready to give the North Korea like the establishing a liaison office, and for the second thing, the building of the peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. I believe that the two countries are ready to sign, or not to sign, but to just declare the kind of the peace declaration to end the Korean War. And for the last the agreement, the returning the remains of the American soldiers, I believe that they are already talking about the further the returning the plans. So for the 3 agreements would be good, and we would see some meaningful progress. But the last one is most important and uncertain. How much the North Korea is willing to give up as a nuclear program, and what U.S. want to give to North Korea for the corresponding measures. And taken all the information together, and I think that Yongbyon, the nuclear facility, under the negotiation table, and the freezing and the WND programs are also on the table. And I believe that two countries are still talking about the details of those 2 things. And for the corresponding U.S. measures, all the 3 agreements I mentioned, that could be the corresponding measures for the U.S.
Well, I think Trump would be pretty happy with an inventory from the North showing what they have, rather than any bigger step than that. And it would be quite remarkable to have some form of an agreement declaring an end to the Korean War after all these decades. Of course, you'd need to get South Korea and China on board on that as well eventually. In regards to China, they are the elephant in the room. Kim Jong-un took a train all the way through China. Many thought he might stop and speak to Chinese President Xi Jinping along the way, but he did not. But how involved do you think China is in these diplomatic back channels? And do you think Beijing is putting pressure on North Korea on what is going to happen at this summit in Hanoi?
Well, it is true that China is also important actor in this matter, but I think that China's influence over North Korea is limited, because historically, China and North Korea, they just take advantage of each other for its political and diplomatic benefits. And for this summit, and North Korea and Chinese leaders met in advance of this summit, and they exchanged what they want for this summit. And I think that Chairman Kim is just listened to what President Xi wanted, and just considered that thing indirectly. So still China is putting some influence over this summit, but the influence is limited. So just the step back and helping the other hands or assistance to North Korea to increase the North Korea's the bargaining power against the United States.
While all the focus is on denuclearization, it's unfortunate that one point is often overlooked, and that's namely North Korea's atrocious records on human rights, political prison camps, executions, and whatnot. And do you think that the regime's human rights abuses are ever going to come up in a serious way in any of these summits? It's fair to say both Presidents Trump and Moon have kind of deferred on this issue. They're focused primarily on the peace process and denuclearization. But at what point do they have to start saying to Kim Jong-un, look, you've got to start treating your people with some respect?
Well, the human rights issue of the North Korea is also important, that the matter that the U.S. and the South Korea take, but we are in the initial process. So for this, the phase of time, it is more important to continue the negotiations instead of the North Korea walking away from the negotiation. So I believe that President Trump and Secretary Pompeo and President Moon are already recognizing the importance of the human rights issues of North Korea, but it's not the right time to talk about that. But after establishing some initial progress, and before before the tour, moving toward the last stage of the negotiations, and these countries are talking about human rights issues, because U.S. Congress is very eager to deal with the human rights issues of North Korea, and to implement the peace agreement and the normalizing relations between the two countries, it is necessary for U.S. Congress to ratify the peace agreements and the normalizing relations. So before the stage, the North Korea leader and the President Trump need to talk about human rights issues to satisfy or please U.S. Congress.
Well, it's whenever there is a bill put on the table regarding North Korean human rights in U.S. Congress, it's almost unanimous, the vote in favor of that bill. So hopefully we'll see something come of that down the line. Professor, as always, it's been wonderful to hear your insights. I believe you're coming back to join us again on Thursday, the day of the actual summit. So we look forward to hearing your insights then. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you.
Okay, thanks so much.
Now, in other news, on Friday, Koreans will celebrate the 100th anniversary of a crunch historic event that helped South Korea break free from Japan's oppressive colonial rule. Ahead of the anniversary of the March 1st independence movement, President Moon Jae-in on Thursday emphasized the importance of Seoul taking control in deciding the peninsula's fate. Shin Se-min tells us more.
With Korea set to mark the 100th anniversary of the country's March 1st independence movement and the establishment of the provisional government, President Moon Jae-in highlighted the importance of Korea's leadership in deciding the fate of the country and the peninsula at large. Taking the weekly cabinet meeting outside the parameters of a public facility to a memorial of an independence fighter, the president said the country had come a long way since 100 years ago, when it was under the colonial rule and unable to decide its own fate.
그러나 지금 국제사회에서 우리의 위상은 완전히 달라졌습니다. 충분히 자부심을 가지만 합니다.
Emphasizing that the country is only one of 7 countries in the world with more than 50 million people and per capita income of $30,000, the president said Koreans must take control of its own destiny. He also took pride that his country is now getting more attention and acknowledgments from around the world for its role in managing changes on the Korean peninsula.
우리는 더 이상 역사의 변방이 아닙니다. 새로운 백년을 다짐하고 열어갈 역량이 우리 안에 있다는 자긍심과 자신감으로 새로운 시대를 함께 열어가기를 희망합니다.
Also ahead of the Kim-Trump summit in Vietnam, President Moon had previously called for preparation on resuming inter-Korean economic cooperation, something he said was required for Seoul to take control of the fate of the Korean peninsula. In time for the anniversary of the 100th independence movement this week, the government also conferred the Republic of Korea Medal to Yu Kwan-soon, a female martyr who symbolized the March 1st independence movement. It's an upgrade from the third highest civilian order she had been given before. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
South Korea's main opposition, Liberty Korea Party, is set to hold its national convention on Wednesday to pick its new leader as well as members of its Supreme Council. Vying for the leadership spot, the three candidates, former Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-an, former Seoul Mayor Oh Se-hoon, and two-term lawmaker Kim Jin-tae carried out extensive campaigning until the day before the election. The new chair, who takes the helm for the next 2 years, will be tasked with fostering unity among Conservatives and steering the party to victory in the 2020 general elections. The result of the election is set to be released at around 7 p.m. this evening. And that's where we're going to have to leave the news for now, unfortunately. Stay tuned to us here on Arirang TV. Plenty more coming up on the North Korea U.S. summit that's set to start in the coming hours in Hanoi, Vietnam. We'll be connecting with all our correspondents there in Hanoi throughout the day and tomorrow as well. Until next time, goodbye.